All right, this is Think or Be Eaten, and we have with us, once again, William Ramsey, and you've heard William here, and you've heard him with Randy, also on the Watchmen, and you'll hear him again there. He's very interesting. He was on with regard to the book that he has written. He's now come out with a DVD, His Maiden Voyage, and that particular, I hate to say the word milieu, because it makes me, I don't know, it doesn't come out, I can't say milieu. I'll say genre. How's that?
Great.
All right. Thanks a lot, William, for coming back on this Thanksgiving Day, for most of us, a 4-day holiday.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Always good to talk to you. Now,
Great,
what we're going to, I guess, embrace today is what I believe is the working title for the DVD, and that is Occult Hollywood. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right. And folks, there'll be links up to all that with this audio, so we won't go into it. You can find it on YouTube. You can see a trailer there. You made a good point from the outset, and the first off is when we use the word occult. All right, one, what is the real meaning of the word, or should be the textbook, if you will, meaning for the word, and then what do you think it has morphed into being?
Well, I think, at least my reading of occult means, according to the Webster Merriam Dictionary in 2010, is not revealed, not easily apprehended, or hidden from view. So, for me, that also encompasses a whole variety of different subjects that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, or I wasn't aware of, and it does include Satanism, kind of other secret things or things that have been hidden as far as from a political sense or social, cultural things that are kind of an undercurrent. So that's it. But it's kind of morphed into becoming something that's more synonymous with dark side or Satanism. So I can understand that, but I guess in the sense that I use it is just really to see things that are not easily detectable. So, and that's kind of more the verb.
Not that you are supposed to be some kind of etymologist, but where do you think the term cult comes into play? Because you can understand if a cult sort of got an even worse rap because of what we think of when we use the term cult. Would you consider cult maybe the kind of word that has done much to make the other word occult even more pejorative?
Yeah, perhaps. I bet they have the same kind of root word. I wouldn't know. I'd have to look up the dictionary for that. But yeah, I would say so. And they're both pejorative. I think occult and cult are fairly similar, because probably a cult uses occult concepts and ideas to kind of maintain the power structure within, those kind of dark societies, I guess.
And not to beat the terminology to death, but I think it's probably rightfully so that people look at cult and occult as being evil, because even if it means not easily apprehended, and we know cult kind of has an implication, if not explicit, about being secretive, doing things in the dark, if you will. And that, I think most people, you would ask them a straight-out question, what would you relate to dark, what would you relate to light? And here's the word cult. Boom, it'd go over to the dark.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and when groups that you don't know what they're doing, you kind of think that they're doing what they're doing behind closed doors, because it's probably not, Girl Scout cookies. So,
right.
Yeah, but you also mentioned something before we came on, and I think you make it a really salient point. And it hits me all the more because of something I went through. And I actually was thinking about this even prior to you coming on. I was just kind of rummaging what I had done. And then you came out and said this just a couple of minutes ago. And if you don't mind, I'd really like you to share your thoughts on what you're doing and what people should not necessarily construe you as doing.
Well, I just wanted to say kind of make a blanket statement that I'm not into the occult. I don't admire it. These are things that I'm learning that I didn't know about 3 to 5 years ago, that I've slowly, come to my understanding. And, I'm definitely not a Satanist. I don't think that a lot of these things are worth getting into. I think they're worth being aware of, definitely, and being reproved. And my whole idea is kind of to reveal them, not to initiate individuals into any type of mystery religion / satanic occult or cult practices.
And you know, too, in Scripture, you are exhorted to do things out in the light, and I think that light dark motif is there for a lot of reasons. I mean, one is metaphorical, but it's true, and I just want to share with you something that occurred this week. Angie from Think or Be Eaten sent me a YouTube link about, I guess, some Europeans, apparently Scandinavians, that were running with occult symbolism right out in the open and such. One of the people that was referred to in it was the legendary, if not notorious, Freeman from Austin. And,
right.
You know, I looked at it, and it just brought me back to a time. And get through this quickly. Here's where I'm going. When I first got into the research back, arguably in late 2000, there's a certain, I guess, allure, even though it's a little tawdry, if you will. There's a certain fascination, and there is generally an interest in how much corporations and everyday life, including churches and religions, have embraced occult symbolism. And when you get into something like that, you can kind of stay there, and you can keep on going and going and going. And then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I get it now. All right, I get it. When I see companies using starbursts and pyramids and all this stuff, yeah, I kind of get what that's going. And is it always known to be that way? I don't really think so, but I'm sure most of it is a wink and a nod to the masses of those who are billionaires and such, and hence that's why you get these logos. But there was something else that occurred, and what you're hopefully going to avoid, I walked right into. In the year that I did the show Beyond the Grassy Knoll, which was kind of a linchpin between this and the very first show, which was Visigoth's Grassy Knoll, I had on a lot of cultic people. I let everybody come on. And I'll say I got maybe one or two very poignant emails, not the crazies as usual, that said, do you really think, you should be having these people on? I know where you stand, meaning me, but I don't know. And I said, well, I'm just going to let them have their say. They know I don't agree with it, et cetera, et cetera. And I really did believe that. But then I found out it just started building up inside of me, and throughout the year I did Beyond the Grassy Knoll, that what I was probably doing was giving these people more credence than they deserved. And in that sense, I was wrong. And I got myself away from it. I rent my clothes and never went back again. And I won't have anything to do with any of those people. And what's funny in the end, William, and I want you to respond to that because hopefully you'll not wind up where I was, but the people that get involved with this occult symbolism and seemingly pointing it out to the uninitiated are really no different. I mean, yeah. They're also on the same side of the street. They're New Agers. And that's what made me laugh, because in this whole, NWO crowd that either hosts or listens to this kind of show, a lot of people in the audience don't realize that the ones who are bringing them this information aren't necessarily any different and are into things that will hasten down the New World Order, especially the religious aspects. So go ahead, Wayne, I'm sorry.
No, but I totally agree with you, and I myself have made a similar mistake. I went on a show that had in the title truth in it, so I assumed they had my understanding of truth, and they were basically just interested in all kinds of mysteries, and I actually was ambushed by a living, breathing, practicing Satanist who basically retread all of the tired old demonic arguments, and it was really shocking, but I was mistaken, and I've learned myself just since I've self-published that book that not everybody who is in the 9/11 truth movement or in arguably what would be the interest in the truth are there to actually get at the crux of things. They're more interested in peddling the same kind of mystery mythos type of ideas that the New World Order would love people to believe. So they're really actually trying to initiate them into their view, and those people are like Zarion, Jordan Maxwell, and David Icke, Freeman, these guys. I mean, Freeman makes all kinds of references to Discordianism, but he doesn't ever tell anybody what that means or where it's from. And that's basically from Robert Anton Wilson, one of the great writers of satanic doctrine in the 20th century. And basically, it's like selling people myths, that actually are tantamount to just a more sophisticated lie. And Jordan Maxwell, I don't know if you know this, but his name actually is taken from one of Blavatsky's books, and his real name is like David Prine or something like that. But so you're right, and so I've fallen into the same trap. I'll have to get this interview that I had with this Satanist. It was very interesting.
It's a classic, huh?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, here's the kicker: is I went on this show it was the 9th year anniversary of 9/11 to try to tell people that, there's an occult / satanic influence upon the event, and they brought on a guy who's a member of a Crowleyan lodge, who's done the Gnostic Mass, and spouted the same stuff from Crowley, like Aiwass loves humanity, which is just absolutely disgusting. So it was amazing. It was an amazing interview.
Well, I think we're both agreed that this can go someplace you don't want it to go, and you might be giving more, like I said, credence and exposure to some of these characters, much more. In fact, nothing should be paid them. But I was guilty of it for sure, and that isn't going to happen again. That symbolism is all around you, gives you an idea, but it's also something that's reflective of the fact that we know that Satan is if you will, the Lord of the world for a time. And since this is his purlieu, obviously it's going to have trademarks all the time. But let me give you one example, though, real quick, and we'll get into the body of the work you've done. There's a company that sprang up in New Jersey, and because of my wife's work, she passed along what she came upon. And it's about, which is kind of springing up all over now. This one is probably 3 years old. I can't remember the name of the company, but it's one of these things where it's, if we wanted to title it prettily, we'd say it's kind of like surveillance or watchfulness, or keeping an eye on what you would call what do they say, suspicious people. Now everybody's looking for suspicious. All right, and the name of the company was I something or other. And I can't remember what it was. The I obviously was a play on two things. One, the letter I, which was used as a logo, and, of course, the human eye. Now, there was a graphic that went with the company's name, and it was the Eye of Horus. Not a full-blown Eye of Horus, but it was an Eye of Horus. And I'm looking at this, I was saying to my wife, I'm like, now, here's an example. Does this guy know? Now, probably an ad agency did it. Maybe he commissioned it, and they did it, but I'm just like, could this guy possibly know what he's doing? And what creeped me out is I don't go for these snitch websites. This stuff about, what is the one about, there's bullying and all this stuff. And it's like, it just reeks of snitch culture. And it also reeks of anonymous assassination, character assassination. Somebody who's anonymous says so-and-so did a thing. Now, okay, great, I didn't do it, but now I got to prove I'm innocent when I didn't do anything at all. And that whole culture that's springing up, which is also concomitant when you get to heavy control and enlarging powers from the state. So at any rate, I don't know what he did, if he knew it or not, but it just happens out there, and you got to wonder if it's a coincidence. But if you stay too long there, you really do get distracted, and it doesn't come to anything. It's the same old, same old. Satan's around. What do you expect? That's the way it goes.
Right.
Now, with Occult Hollywood, I went down that road a number of years ago, and I have to credit John Valentini for actually doing this. But I think what Valentini did has gotten misused, and I'll say more about that later. Tell me how you got involved and why this was important to you. Was it because you wrote the book that you found these things out, or did you know this going into writing the book?
Well, I had seen stuff on your website. I had seen some things about the numerology, and I hadn't quite put it all together. And just to retread how I got into the occult was from 9/11. I saw all those numbers. So then, once I discovered that how much Crowley had influenced people and things, then I began to start seeing them in films and references that kind of confirmed their importance, not just to the events of 9/11, but the general culture. So then I just kind of kept a recording of them in my mind, and I got to a certain point where I could put together kind of a visual record of that so that people can see it. And when they see it all together, I think that will, provides an evidentiary proof proof and basis for my positions that I put in my book. So, it's something that I've kept an eye on for the last couple of years, and I finally had the time to kind of go through and just not only put the numbers, but also kind of references to the active, just to show that Satanism is an active element in the common culture and has been for a long period of time as well. So,
yeah, and I think we talked about this in one of the very many variations of the shows that we've done together, yourself, with Randy, myself, and all that. And you would think that Satan very much would use this as a medium, mainly because I'm saying we've talked about Satan as being the prince of the air. That's one of his titles.
Right.
But we also thought, why don't we add the word waves to air, and maybe that's where we're at, the prince of the airwaves, or prince of media, because it seems that much of this kind of information, just basically an evilness, is certainly disseminated through the media, whether it's TV, whether it's movies, music, whatever. And it seems to be taking even a nastier turn, and that's, I've watched now for like almost 6 decades. And I don't like what I'm seeing, but then I've been told also that my parents couldn't stand what I watched. So you're wondering if it's just that you're an old fogey, or whether or not you're seeing a continual disintegration and a denigration of all the arts.
I would say, I'm 40 years old, so for me, I've seen it getting worse as well. So it just seems like, and it's becoming more in the open, a lot of the satanic references and stuff.
And don't you have to wonder, though, truly, if they named Hollywood because of the wood of the wand that magicians use, supposedly?
I would not be surprised if that's really the basis, honestly.
And Harry, my old partner, used to go, well, then tell me about Hollywood, Florida. And I said, oh, look, I don't know, but I think I do remember that Hollywood, Florida came after Hollywood, California, and I believe it was tied into a possible second site for making movies. So I do believe that's one of the reasons why Hollywood, Florida was named such. But Harry was a great skeptic, but he healthily was a skeptic, and I don't mind that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that other one was also involved in this. Well, I tell you what, you've got a list of the Rogues Gallery here. Do you want to start working into that, or how would you like to take it?
I think I basically captured a lot of these things from film. I also saw your website with the references to 9/11, so that was kind of something that I had incorporated in some of those things I put into the movie. But I just started off my movie with kind of a reference to Kenneth Anger. Kenneth Anger seems to be one of the still living, breathing Satanists who has kind of a direct tie to Aleister Crowley through one of Crowley's followers by the name of Gerald York. And I'd spoken about York in our earlier discussion about Crowley. His brother was a friend of George Orwell / Eric Blair, and so Gerald York with Aleister Crowley. There were some rituals they did, or actually a public meeting that's well recorded in the local papers at the time at the Cleopatra's Needle in London, where Crowley, warns the world that if they don't accept the Book of the Law, there will be this disastrous war. And he did that 2 years in a row, and Gerald York was there. Well, Gerald York is a friend of Kenneth Anger, and Kenneth Anger mentions him. He had there was a showing at the Hammer Museum in Brentwood, which is close to Hollywood in Los Angeles, where Kenneth Anger kind of discusses Crowley and discusses his movies. So I kind of started off with that just to show that there's a living, breathing continuum from these, from Crowley, the great beast, to the modern day. And so I kind of start off with that. I talk about some of the other followers or friends of Crowley. Dennis Wheatley, who was a much more well-known novelist from the 50s who wrote a bunch of occult novels, and there were a couple films that were based on Crowley that were made. One is called The Devil Rides Out, and the main character, Mokata, is based on Crowley. So I included that in the film just for a little, visual reference to Crowley. It shows some of the ritual magic that they were doing. And then I kind of get into the general followers of Crowley, the directors who, not followers of Crowley, but of the occult in general, who have input some of the numerical references and just general references to the cult in their films. And those ones were that I have so far are Oliver Stone, Stanley Kubrick, Roman Polanski are really the big three that I kind of came up with. And so I just kind of went through some of their movies and just showed where these guys are putting things into these movies that have occult/satanic import.
All right, good.
And basically, what I did is just go through and kind of detail it. I mean, in Natural Born Killers, at the very beginning of Natural Born Killers, there is a 77 and a 66 on the intro, and then I have World Trade Center, which is the film that they did about the whole 9/11 event. There's a repeated use of 93, which is Crowley's number. His numbers for Thelema and Agape in the Kabbalah were 93, as well as the number for the chief demon that he was in contact with by the name of Awas. So that was there. There's also reference to some kind of death devil figure that follows Jim Morrison throughout the Doors film. And there's witchcraft sequences in there that include blood drinking and ritual magic.
Let me hold you there for a second, if I could. I'd like your take on this right off the top of your head, because that's always going to be the best one. In the movie made about Jim Morrison, do you remember what that evil spirit looked like when it was corporeal? Do you remember the shape of it and what sex it was?
Oh, of the guy who's following Morrison around?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like some kind of bald-headed man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah, so, I mean, and that's supposedly the devil's haircut is a bald head, so it's like either Crowley, and that, So, for me, I couldn't figure out if it was the death or devil that's following around, but there were also like there's a sequence where this figure goes by Jim Morrison and nods his top hat to them, which was very satanic to me, so it's just a very strange inclusion into that film. And, so then just another thing that JFK had in Oliver Stone, in the JFK he had the meeting with, the Garrison has a meeting with Mr. X, who is based on Fletcher Prudy, the writer of an important book called The Secret Team. But the whole sequence takes place on the Mall in Washington, D.C., with this huge obelisk of George Washington in the background. And it suggests, in my opinion, that, what Oliver Stone is saying is that the killers of JFK had attachments to the secret religion or the mystery religion, and I think that's basically the truth. When you look at the cast of characters who are responsible for murdering the president, they're either attached to Skull and Bones or, some type of occult group. George W. Bush, who's a member of Skull and Bones. There's E. Howard Hunt, who wrote 8 or 9 occult novels that under a different name. So he was very much into the occult. E. Howard Hunt wrote about 20 to 25 spy/occult books under pseudonyms during his lifetime. So he was constantly writing as well as, engaging in spycraft. So I think Oliver Stone knows quite a bit about Satanism and the occult, a lot more than it would suggest in his films. And then in Alexander, there's the Prometheus speech where the intro, and it seems like a lot of these guys put their markers right at the beginning of the film. So most of these markers take place at the beginning of film. So in Alexander, another movie by Oliver Stone, written by Oliver Stone, he talks about and equates Alexander to Prometheus, calls him a magus, and then kind of makes this NWO speech. And you can see it in my movie, but it's basically Alexander put together the whole world and made a place of peace. But the whole speech is bogus because Alexander basically butchered his way throughout the entire earth and slaughtered everybody. And then, here's this character calling it a kind of peace. So I think that, if you listen to the speech in the Alexander movie, I think you'll find it very interesting, especially, this Prometheus is the symbol of Satan, and there's Promethean figures throughout the cultures, for example, at the Rockefeller Center in New York City. So I found that Oliver Stone knows a lot more about the occult, and he puts it into his films quite a bit.
Was he that was telling me that he lays that in more than we know? We had a conversation a while back, and you said that somebody seemed pretty fascinated with that, and I'm wondering if it was Stone or not.
I don't recall. I know that the guy who did Millennium and X-Files said that, and I have that in my film. His name is Chris Carter.
Right.
I have a clip of him in my film where he just outright says there's a lot of secret things that I've put in my, the X-Files and Millennium. And Millennium has all kinds of references to 9/11 and 11s, which, are Crowley's numbers. 11 is my number, which was in his Book of the Law. And he said it was the number par excellence for magic. And
Well, before we move on any deeper, there's a couple of things I'd like to ask you so we can clean up some loose ends that are at least in my mind, if it's okay.
Sure.
All right. John Valentini, the individual I was talking about, is in Australia. And he had written me, and that's how this whole thing started. And he had written a book. He had me write the foreword. And then, he just, I don't want to say disappeared, but nothing came forth. I didn't hear from him again. He had the full lineup of all the images on his blog spot. That's down. In fact, if you go to one of my pages and you click on the total images, it will come up, as a 404 or whatever. That's
right.
Valentini's own site. I mean, first of all, I hope he's okay. But here's where I think, I know I might have gone wrong, and I'm not saying that he did, but now looking back, this is what my take is. When they put in these kind of winks and nods, these markers,
right.
I think it's their way of celebrating. I think it's probably a little, a behind the back of the hand snicker at us. Mm-hmm. But I think what we did, and I'll just say it for myself, what I did was, can we now, knowing that happened about 9/11, can we extrapolate and say, okay, there's something else out there that they're doing right now? And so what happened is that, not that I did this, maybe I did, I don't know, but it gave rise to all people now looking at all kinds of movies and pulling numbers out left and right saying, blah, blah, blah. Now, do you remember this last upswell that took place in November, right around the 6th or the 11th?
What upswell is that?
Well, all of a sudden I started getting emails about somebody who put out a YouTube, which when I look at it, I mean, personally, I think someone like that borrowed a lot from us. Not that he knew it was from us, because we got borrowed a lot from. There were images that we used, and I credit with 90% of those coming from Valentini, that all of a sudden wound up in other places. I'm not saying something else couldn't have happened concurrently, and that really isn't the point of why we're doing this, but all of a sudden I see this come out, and we were doing this in 03. And so this movie comes around, and they're running with The Simpsons. Now, as you know, Valentini had as one of the images the little Simpson girl holding a
9/11, right? I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, it was like what would you call it? It's a tourist magazine or something. You get the 9 and the Twin Towers, and remember too that Carter and Fox, both those entities, of course, are joined at the hip. And when Carter's not doing something, Fox still seems to be doing things, because Carter obviously had nothing to do with The Simpsons, and yet stuff pops up there. They even did a classic thing on the Stonecutters. Do you remember that?
Right, yes, I've seen that as well.
It's kind of funny, who did all this? We did, So, but
right, they take credit for everything.
Right. And I mean, it was done well. But this last thing has Homer in a hammock. I don't know, some clock falls down next to him, and has the hands on, the minute hand is on the 11, and the hour hand is on the 6. Now, of course, it's 5 to 6, which with Homer, dinner time, he never misses it. But then it was also next to some object that looked like 11. So people were going, well, maybe something's going to happen on 11, 6, 10. And it didn't. And then you had this guy, Cliff, whatever his name is, High, with his web bot and stuff like that, saying something big was going to go down on the 11th. And I'm like, well, you get out of here with this stuff. So here's where I'm going. I don't think we could ever look at that and try to predict. I do think, though, however, after the event's over, it has been commemorated. For us to go running around, and you're not doing this, and I'm not saying you are at all, but these other folks going around going, well, maybe, look at these numbers here. Let it go. Just drop it. Right. It's not worth life to be doing that kind of thing. And 9 times out of 10, if not more, it'll wind up at dead end. And that's not the way we're supposed to live life, and we're not supposed to be here, rolling dice on whether or not you got it right at the next attack. But I do think it's important, because if you do believe that was inlaid in those works of art prior to the event, then what it tells me, and Willie, I'm going to let you speak to this, what I'm saying to folks is understand how powerful the entity is that you're up against, and exactly what or who he has marshaled as some of his forces.
No, I totally agree, and I think that a lot of these numbers are put in there. Not all of the things refer to 9/11 event, although there are 9/11, and my view of the numbers 9 and 11 is moving away not only as a foreshadowing of the event, but I think they're just power numbers in themselves for the occult.
Yes, they are.
I think that. So I think that there might not even be a connection between people putting these into these cultural works of art and the event of 9/11. They just may be what people use as their prime numbers to show themselves or mark themselves as devil worshippers. So I think that may be why they're there. And my interpretation of why they're there has definitely changed or matured, I guess. But so I definitely believe that there's a lot of that going on, and it's weird how even when I went back, and I will kind of get into this on talking about some of these earlier movies where the 11s show up in movies from the 60s and the 70s. So it seems like a common theme. So
sure.
Anyway.
All right, now let me go on to the WTC for a second. One of the things that complicates the things about the WTC, you see a lot of occultism or occultic behavior associated by others to that place because of the towers for obvious reasons. But one of the other things that's happened in the past, and I don't know if we talked about this, William, but I grew up there and I watched them being built, and all of us said, they're going to fly an airplane into that. I mean, because it almost begged for somebody to do that. I mean, if you think about those towers, at one hand you can say, oh, they were beautiful, but a lot of people said, how obnoxious and obtrusive can you get with phallic symbols?
Right.
And I mean, now when I look back, I'm like, you're right. And again, nobody downtown wanted those things built. That was strictly the force behind the Rockefellers, with David and with his brother, who at that time was governor. But they beg to get hit. I mean, they just stand out there. It's like somebody who's going, come on, hit me in the nose.
Right.
And a lot of some of the images, William, that came from like the Mario Brothers and some of these other games, that's because in the psyche of everyone, it was kind of like, when is somebody going to fly a plane, some dumbass, going to fly a plane into the buildings? And
it's interesting you say that, because in one of the movies that I came across, Godspell, which is the movie based on the play, and there is an intro into Godspell where the lead character, who represents John the Baptist, is walking across the New York Bridge. What's the name of the bridge? Anyway, he's walking across the bridge, and in the background is the Twin Towers. But
it's the Brooklyn Bridge.
Brooklyn Bridge, thank you. And completely outside of the film, there's no involvement of planes. At that very intro, there's a sound of a plane in the background that's very prevalent as they're fixated on the Twin Towers. And the whole rest of the movie is just a set piece, and there's actually a scene from them dancing on top of the Twin Towers, and it's very eerie. And so the buildings themselves have some kind of occultic import, and there's a bunch of things that are very strange about it, especially all Rockefeller buildings, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But in particular, the Twin Towers, there's the center of the buildings had this bronze sculpture. They called it the Great Bronze Caryatid. And it's a circular bronze structure. It's made out of 52 pieces, or was. And the strange thing is that they called it the Great Bronze Caryatid. Well, it wasn't a true caryatid. A caryatid is a statue that functions as a column upholding a temple. So a caryatid, in the true sense, is this kind of sculpture of a human being that upholds a temple. But they called the sculpture a caryatid, and what it represented was upholding this temple to the creation. The idea behind it was to show the pieces coming together in a world order system based on economics, and that's the understanding. So you have this very strange temple occult relationship, or like pagan import put onto the sculpture that really doesn't there. It's not a caryatid. It'd be like calling your car an orange or something. It just doesn't apply. But if you look at it at the Twin Towers as a significant structure that has occultic meaning, then it makes more sense. And the other thing is that on the entranceway into the subway underneath the Twin Towers was artwork called the Oculus, the one-eyed Oculus. At the very center of this picture of the Earth was the all-seeing eye, or the single eye, and that's you can just look that up on the internet. It's in my movie Oculus. So clearly, the Rockefellers have built into their huge structures within New York a lot of occult themes, and we've talked about this in the past. The Prometheus and the Atlas that are in the Rockefeller Center are both straight out of Blavatsky's doctrines of Satan holding up the earth, and as a representation of Prometheus. And then you have the meditation room at the UN, which was also built by the Rockefellers, and that has references to Horus and stuff like that in there. So the buildings themselves are very occultic. The WT were, I should say.
While we're at almost we're a little bit past the 1/3 mark of this audio, tell folks now all what's going on and where they can go ahead and for perhaps one-stop shopping.
Yeah, they can just go to my website. It's www.occult911.com. The film itself is called Occult Hollywood. I also have completed a visual, basically another documentary on a Crowley, which I think people might find interesting. Talks about some other things of Crowley that aren't dealt with in the book, and some visual stuff, so they might be interested in that. And yeah, so that's basically, and you can see a couple trailers from my films too, so that might give you an idea of what's included. I mean, basically, the Occult Hollywood is just a series of references, and I think we'll go in greater detail just referring to and trying to explain a lot of these occult references in the films.
All right, before we go off into the very strange worlds of Kubrick and Polanski, let me just ask you briefly, because I didn't spend a lot of time on this, and I really only watched the movie after I got hip to what's going on. Have you watched The Brotherhood of the Bell to a point where you are pretty familiar with the content?
No, not all the way. I haven't watched it all the way through. I've watched the intro and about halfway through. But the intro, for me, was what was just enough to kind of set it off. But I was familiar with the storyline, which is, the secret society that fixes things, etc.
Right. And,
have you watched the whole thing?
No, I haven't, and that's why I asked you, because I came into it, and all I remember is Glenn Ford, and everybody was like Men in Black. You remember that? Everybody was like black suits on. And
right.
I didn't stick around long enough, and I didn't see the beginning. But I'm watching it, and I'm like, yeah, I really should spend some time at another time to watch and see what they were doing with this, and if there was also some kind of foreshadowing. Because here's the point. Are some people running with this and have done so in the past because they understand a little bit of what's going on, and it's really fertile field for making a movie? And since most folks aren't aware of what goes on the other side of the veil, this will all look like them, like just really great creative science fiction or futurism or just plain, occult stuff. So, some of this might just be somebody making a little hay on some knowledge of it, and certainly in other cases it's not. Brotherhood of the Bell is one I'm interested in because when it was made with Glenn Ford and such, not that the actors have to know what's going on, and I think that's the case where you see some of this stuff laid into movies. The cast doesn't have to know what's going on.
Right.
And the technical people don't know what's going on. All that has to matter is that the producer and whoever's cutting the movie, knows about this, and whoever shot a certain scene.
Right.
And at the time it's all happening, nobody knows what that's connected to. They just do it.
I agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. So I mean, it's they're just running with it. Carter's an extreme, is another example because he is plugged in, and I also think he has a little bit of a sardonic streak of humor in him as well. And unless you have any kinds of inhibitions about me doing this or any kind of opposite feelings, I think I'd like to even put in that little interview that he has with a former FBI agent, and I put former in quotation marks, at the beginning of the box set of Millennium. Because in it, the guy says, yeah, there's a Millennium group. And I mean, not even like, just balls out, right? I'm like, not even trying to deny it. He just looks at you like, yeah, it's almost like, yeah, there is, and what are you going to do about it?
Right.
So,
well, there's an interesting, I think the Millennium episode called Clocks is basically this confrontation between two of the main characters and the head of the Millennium Group, and the Millennium is basically the Illuminati. I mean, basically, he's saying there's going to be upheavals, and which side you want to be on, and the main character, who's played by Henriksen, says I don't want to join, and then I think the other character says, well, why are you going to do that? Why do you care about these people? I mean, it's all the standard kind of argumentation that takes place between people today. I mean, basically you have people who want to join up with this secret, the secret groups or initiates, and people who don't.
Now, when people snap on those who they call conspiracy theorists because they bring up information they never encountered, so therefore it can't be that they've been shuttered somewhat, but that you got to be crazy because, well, if it were real, I would have found out about it. No, not necessarily. And here's a good example. You have the spinoff, The Lone Gunman from The X-Files, whose pilot shows these computer geeks hacking into a system that will prevent a 757 from impacting the towers.
Right.
All right, and what happens? 6 months later? It happens,
right.
And nobody in America knows it. So you don't ever tell me about how can it be conspiracy? How can you hide it? Well, you tell me about that, bozo.
I mean, that's kind of like why I put the films together, this film together, is that here's the evidence. When you look at all these little pieces that are included in all these different movies from a lot of different people, you have to come up with certain conclusions, It should force a conclusion that there's something else going on that's outside of the pure view of, the average individual and what's included in, the mainstream media. So, I think that, it's definitely there. There's definitely something going on at the higher levels, and the people who aren't, from one of these top families or went to the top schools or were initiated, need to know about it, but that also, they need to understand that we don't know everything,
No, it's true. You're going to hit this, but I'm just going to mention this now. Most eyes are on Ground Zero with regard to what happened on 9/11, but you have to wonder also about why the other two venues were chosen. And if you were looking for some kind of symbolism, well, one, the one building that gets involved, other than the towers and that complex down there, is the pentagram that is known as the Pentagon. Okay, right. So there's one right there. And also Shanksville. That involves the Flight 93. That's the plane associated with that. So there's something. And also Colvin will tell you that there's heavy mojo in that area, and he's not alone. Denton, who is a archaeologist, also says there's something interesting about that whole area. You could say that about a lot of things, I guess, but still in all, I mean, Colvin has been talking about this for years before. So at any rate...
well, here's another interesting thing. Did you see what they built at the place where 93 landed?
Oh, no, tell me an obelisk.
They built an obelisk, but they also built the star within the crescent. The whole design of the memorial is a crescent and star motif.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so, I mean, heavily occultic, and, I mean, it's used in Islam, but it's also used in the occult. I think it means the morning star or something. I don't remember exactly, but it represents has some occult meaning to it.
Well, I'm thinking right away. I mean, that is an emblem that's on a number of Muslim nations' flags.
Right.
And do we have a problem with this? I mean, since all these people think that 19 Arab hijackers did this and that they were necessarily Muslims, why are we using that? I mean, of all things to use, why that? And nobody said a thing about it. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. I mean, that's an insult. They're worried about building a mosque near Ground Zero, which if you build anything in southern Manhattan, you're near Ground Zero. I mean, it's the narrowest part of the whole island, so stop. So they get all worked up about that, but they put a crescent moon and a star out in Shanksville, and nobody says anything. You got to love it.
So, yeah, it says here on the Internet, it says it predates Islam by several thousand years. Information on the origins of the symbol are difficult to ascertain, but most sources agree that it's an ancient celestial symbol. In the word used in the worship of the sun, moon, and sky gods.
Well, that makes it okay for me. All right, thanks for sharing it. Honestly, are you going to go off into the wonderful wild worlds now of Kubrick and Roman?
Yeah, I mean Kubrick. He definitely knows a lot more and knew a lot more. Eyes Wide Shut was an example most people know of, but in Dr. Strangelove, there's a 93 reference that happens as they're talking about the Doomsday. And so he definitely knew or understood some of these deep Kabbalistic references to Crowley. And in my opinion, he says it twice, or one of the characters says it twice. So, that's definitely there. There's the 2001, which I've been researching it, and 2001 involves this monolith and contact with alien entities, I guess is what you might call it. And it's pretty interesting that he sat down with Arthur C. Clarke and actually wrote the movie, and Arthur Clarke wrote the book at the same time. So they were in close contact. Arthur C. Clarke is a 33rd degree Mason, so there's high symbology there, which I don't fully understand, but I understand the kind of there's definitely an allegorical tale there about the intro. I've heard Cooper talk about the intro to 2001, where it's a sign of human intelligence. The one group of primates learns how to use a tool, and the others don't, and it's basically conquest. So there's some very interesting things about 2001. One of the interesting things about 2001 is there's that monolith that is basically 9 by 3. And
is that right? 9 by 3?
I think it is. I think it's 3 across 9. But here's what's interesting: is after 2001, the events at the WTC, you can see a picture of it on the internet. There was a Hilton built across from the Trade Center wreckage, and it's an almost exact copy of an obelisk, just like 2001. It is very bizarre. I don't know why it's there or whatever, but I'll send you a picture of it.
Okay.
I'll try to put one up on my website.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's 2001, and then there's the world famous Eyes Wide Shut, which was completed, but it was re-edited after Kubrick's edit. He turned in his edit and died about 4 or 5 days later. His wife said he was in good shape or was healthy. He died in his sleep, and there's all kinds of references in there to the rainbow, which is an occult symbol or used in the occult. A lot of people use the rainbow as a symbol of all the different signs of the zodiac, as well as all the different characters and people that are used in the occult. There's a rainbow of individuals who are Satanists. And that's why you see Black Sabbath, after they broke up, the next occult band was Rainbow, if you remember that. And it seems kind of strange to people, but that's because the rainbow has a significant import. So that's included in Eyes Wide Shut. There's 11 consorts in the whole magical sequence. And when Cruz's character gets caught and is entreated to come before this kind of a decision-making body, there's a guy sitting on a chair with a double-headed eagle of masonry on the back. So God only knows what other references are used or were used in Kubrick's original film, but a lot of that just hit the cutting room floor. So we'll never know, I guess.
2 movies that disturb me more than any others. One was Angel Heart, and that to me is the most disturbing of all of them. And yet, I don't know, it seemed like De Niro extricated himself from that movie without any problems. Mickey Rourke was in it, and of course, well, maybe he didn't. Lisa Bonet, I think her name was the darling of the, what's his face? Help me out here with the funny guy. Yeah, I know, we're having brain farts here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm doing this. Anyway, Dr. Cosby, Bill Cosby. She was in that show, and then she went out and did that.
Lenny Kravitz.
All right, yeah. And so, Cosby basically turned his back on her. So.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He turned his back on her because of that movie?
Not happy. Nobody was happy that she had played such an upright citizen and then had gone into that movie. Nobody was happy with that.
Right.
How long that lasted, I don't know. But, Disney did the same thing with Julie Andrews, by the way. Julie Andrews was his little ingenue, squeaky clean vanilla ice cream. And then she made a movie, I think, with Paul Newman called Torn Curtain, in which she, dressed down and got into it with Paulie doing the horizontal mambo, and then Disney was upset about that. So anyway, that's not unusual. But both movies are upsetting, and certainly Eyes Wide Shut tells you a lot that you probably don't want to know about. And that movie seemed to have some collateral damage, including the marriage of their 2 stars, Tom Cruise. And also Kubrick dies during it, and the whole thing just seems to be, to this day, just under this pall, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and it's very odd. I mean, the shooting schedule, they shot and then they decided to reshoot. They called everybody back. The shooting of the film was took 2 years or something very strange. There were all kinds of extra scenes that were put together, so it was a very strange film, and it's fascinating, but it's so on point. It's almost like Kubrick was trying to warn people. Some of these guys, they get older, like Kubrick or some of these other figures, they get on their deathbed, and they want to just try to tell everybody they want to tell people exactly what's going on. And it seems like that's what Kubrick was up to.
When I've done shows with a really fine individual, originally from New Jersey, which always helps, who's now a clinical psychologist out in San Diego and works with ritual abuse victims, so I give her high marks for dealing with that every day. But we had talked about a lot of stuff in the past, and I'd like to have her back on. I don't know how somebody goes in there every day and can do that. And we've talked about this kind of thing. I mean, people have no idea. And I think maybe I misquote Jehovah in Jeremiah. Did he not say to his people when he was supposedly away, when Jehovah turns his face, that they sacrificed their children to Moloch, and he said, never did it enter my mind that you would do such a thing.
Right, yes, that is correct.
All right, and so, I mean, if Jehovah can say that, can you imagine how people would take it when they really realize what's going on? That there are snuff films, there are snuff rituals, there are places like what's portrayed in Eyes Wide Shut, where anything goes. Whatever you let yourself fantasize about, you can do.
Right.
And this is obviously really the club of the rich, who can allow themselves to become incredibly decadent because, hey, in a sense, they're right. They're above the law. And I'm laughing, not laughing, bad choice of words. Just recently, maybe a month or so ago, they get this little murmur out of Colorado that they think they know who killed Joan Benet Ramsey. And every time that happens, I laugh. I'm like, get out of here. She got off as a ritualistic murder, and no one's ever going to find out. How you can screw up a murder scene in a basement, I have no idea, but that seemed to have happened. And of course, Colorado also is the purview of a lot of,
Yeah, I do know.
Yeah.
And it's, that they said that he would have gone to jail if she hadn't passed away. That after they did the autopsy on her, because there was so much evidence of sexual abuse, but they didn't prosecute him on those charges because she was deceased. So, there was a lot more to that story.
Oh, you know it, and I know it. And I mean, that they don't go there is fine. I think enough has been said that wasn't said. And that is the way the world runs, but a lot of people don't believe it. People don't believe it that Franklin was involved in another kind of prurient endeavor. We would call it the Golden Showers Clubs now, but they don't know.
Hellfire Club, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and they don't understand that that's exactly what these characters do. That is how wretched and debauched they are. So, all right.
There's no doubt. That's what happens at the Bohemian Club. There's and different clubs like that. I mean, I've actually seen things like that in where I went to college. There was actually a club, I think it was called the Key. It wasn't exactly Skull and Bones, like something devoted specifically to black magic, but it had degraded to a level that, and people got tapped every year. They started tapping people from fraternities to join this club, and what took place inside there, it was basically a bomb shelter on the south side of the UC Berkeley campus. What they did was unreal. They would vomit on each other.
Yep.
They got locked into this bomb shelter, and they wouldn't be let out until every person drank the equivalent of 24 beers. And it got worse from there. So it's pretty amazing.
People look at leaders, wrongfully so, as being, they vote you in because they think you're better than they are. And when they disappoint you, you want them out because you realize they're not. But for those that are beyond just elections and such, entrenched politicians get there because no matter what happens, they're going to have their seat the next year. And what those people are involved in, and it seems like, when Joseph Conrad wrote Heart of Darkness, he was right, and he knew something too. That when you can set yourselves up as human beings above the law and everything else, basically gods unto yourselves, you don't seem to drift over to the beneficial or the beneficent. You degrade. You go into an absolute downspin into some kind of like creature, and that's the wickedness of the heart that's spoken of in Scripture. So. Right. But
and you see that all throughout ancient Rome, the imperial power, the emperors were some of the most perverse people on earth. And, you see the same thing that happened, during the Bush administration and some of these other people. I mean, once you peel back the curtain, I mean, these people are doing everything, dressing up like women. That's comes to another movie that I didn't include in my documentary, but it's called Salo, which is what I consider to be a very important film. But it's a really rough film to watch. It's based on Marquis de Sade's 120 Days of Sodom. It was directed by a guy by the name of Piero Paolo Pasolini. It's an Italian film. And Salo was basically the rump state that came after the downfall of Mussolini, and is very corrupt. But the whole film basically details what happens between the individuals of this kind of city and these people who have total power, and what they do, their abuses, the just degradation, and it's an amazing film. It's really rough to watch. I don't recommend people turn it on lightly, but I think it's very important because there are times in human history when these type of events happen, where these people just literally go crazy with power and get in the kind of weirdest, craziest abuses imaginable.
Well, you're right. Now, what's the name of it? And spell that title.
It's called Salo, S-A-L-O.
Oh, okay. Well,
based on the 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade.
But that is the condition of the human heart. And I even think about, I mean, you could say it's corny, but I look back to watching the Ten Commandments. And there was a scene, of course, when Jehovah had absented himself. And you remember that they use that word G. Robinson as in this is amazing, But anyway, if you remember, I mean, there's a scene where everybody's going crazy.
Right.
And I was a kid when I saw it. I'm like, nobody behaves like that. Come on. But they do. They go, anything goes. And that also reminds me of that little seemingly innocent song, that came from a play. Nobody knows, anything goes.
Right.
I sometimes wonder about that as well. But anyway, we're also coming close to the top of the hour, or at least our 60 minutes out of 90. And again, do you want to tell folks also what they can go to see more about which we speak? And are you posting anything on the Occult 9/11 site with regard, or do you plan to, with works you've done, essays you've done, audio you've done?
I need to. I've done some essays that are kind of floating around out there, and I'm trying to do that. It's just a matter of time. I'm juggling a lot of different things. So I'm trying to get that done this weekend. So hopefully I'll be able to figure out how to post those references to some of my interviews and some of the stuff I've written, which you can probably just Google William Ramsey Occult. It'll probably pop up.
Oh, by the way, I'm looking at the second page of your outline. I got it in front of me. I just didn't search it to see if you had Salo there. There it is, 1975. Okay, I got you. But now that you're into this and you got your juices going, isn't it interesting that, in a way, the more you do, the more you find out about, and the more you want to do, and it really becomes a question of where did the time go? Right.
I definitely think that. I mean, I feel like I just scratched the surface on the subject, the general occult Hollywood and everything that, we haven't even talked about films that were suppressed yet. I mean, there's a lot of very important works out there that are not, important to that should be seen by the general public, but, are for some reason not really emphasized and weren't emphasized and were definitely hidden. But there's some really fascinating works that, that are out there. But, yeah, I mean, I think I could do probably a 10-hour documentary just cutting and showing these insignias of the occult through our last 60 years of film history. It's pretty amazing.
And so often is the case, and I would think in these terms as well. When you originally start doing things, you think you can knock them off. And for us, it was like, or for myself, it was like an interview. So we'll do an hour. But then you realize what you're involved in. And it's like, okay, forget this 1 hour or one documentary or one book thing. Stand back and just block this whole thing out, because this is a story that can be probably told interestingly and factually, basically forever.
Right, yeah.
Now,
it all comes back to the battle of good and evil, and
there you go. Right.
It seems like every generation has to confront it, and also confront what's happened in the past. So for me, it's like that's what I'm kind of picking up is what I deem to be the true history of our cultural past and political past, and the real history, I guess.
Do you want to go on to another figure that
Sure.
nobody will ever understand? And maybe that's best.
Who's that, Polanski?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Polanski, definitely a Satanist, involved in all kinds of shenanigans on screen and off screen. Most people know that, his wife Sharon Tate was killed by the Manson family, and I've been doing some research on them, and it seems like that whole thing that happened up on Cielo Drive was some type of internal battle between a variety of different Satan worshipers, frankly.
Well, let me ask you this, and you don't have to go out on a limb here, because in a sense, we don't know him well enough to say this. But did you ever get any kind of feeling, indication, or otherwise? Do you think that perhaps he turned his back and let her get sacrificed?
Yeah, I kind of did get that feeling, strangely. Something might have happened. I don't really know, but I've seen him. There was a time where he was interviewed after the event, and he did some of the fakest crying I've ever seen on, even convicted murderers can cry and cry better than he did. It just didn't look like he had any remorse, and this is from like 4 or 5 years ago. I'll have to dig that clip up, but yeah, I definitely got that feeling.
Well, it always helps too when not long after you go ahead and you boink some juvenile,
Yeah, a lot. I mean, that's just the one he got caught with, by the way.
Yeah.
So this guy is a serial. It's very interesting. Anyway, so Polanski, he's done a lot of different movies. The more important ones that have come out, Rosemary's Baby is probably his best known, which deals with this female who, becomes the bride of the devil and has the Antichrist or whatever. So that in that film, there's a number of occult references. I mean, it's basically open. One of the most intriguing and interesting elements that Polanski put in the movies was, and I have it in my documentary, is basically the scene where the husband is with the Mia Farrow character, and she has discovered that this person who's in the Dakota, where John Lennon got shot, and is in the Dakota, is the son of an important witch. And so she has this book called All of Them Witches. She's trying to prove it to her husband, who's on the inside, but she doesn't know it yet. And he takes the book from her after this long discussion, takes it and puts it up on the bookshelf. Well, it looks very casual, but what's interesting is they take the book and he puts it on top of 2 other books. One that's written by Alfred Kinsey, and the other is by Sammy Davis Jr. Now, at a topical level, people wouldn't know what their connection is, but Kinsey is directly traced to Crowley. So here's a person who destroyed the common understanding of sex, and he was a total monster, and Kinsey's personal life was just like something from Salo or Desaad. And then Sammy Davis Jr., who's a member of the Church of Satan, and I have a picture with him, being flanked by both Michael Aquino and Anton LaVey. So there's a little nod to Satanism by Polanski in that little vignette or scene from Rosemary's Baby. So
also,
I think people will find.
They had a death. They had a death during that movie. Also,
I'm sorry.
They had a death in that movie. The crew.
There was a death.
Yes, there was.
Well, tell me about it. I haven't heard that one.
We both we'd have to Google it to see if we could find out the story around it. The death was deemed, I don't know if they call it suspicious. It'll just say, unknown.
Right.
But somebody in that crew died, and I don't know if it was a fall or what. But that was another thing that kind of sullied that whole situation with that movie, and both mixing the real and the supposed unreal.
Interesting. I didn't.
I'll go
look in that.
Yep.
I mean, there's just so much there, frankly. I could probably do a 60-minute detailed analysis of each of those directors, Oliver Stone, Kubrick, and then Polanski. But another of Polanski, he's done a number of movies, but one of the most Luciferian and scary is The Ninth Gate, which is shown on TV quite a bit. It's on AMC a lot. You can kind of tell what the American public is interested in when you watch the American Movie Channel, because they play, The Matrix, Enemy of the State, and The Ninth Gate seemingly frequently. So people are interested in this film, The Ninth Gate. It has Johnny Depp in it, and the symbolism, the satanic symbolism is over the top. It's basically the entire film is a satanic allegorical journey to enter the Ninth Gate of the Holy of Holies, which is the entrance into the Temple of Jerusalem, where they keep the Ark of the Covenant. It seems like the Satanists always have some fixation through high masonry and masonry in general with the temple in Jerusalem. And so, this Johnny Depp character basically is hired by this person named Boris Balkan to find these 3 books that have pictures on them that were supposedly drafted by Lucifer. And each of those pictures has references to important themes within the satanic mythos. So it's a very important movie once you understand or can, get a key to those symbols to understand what's happening or what Satanists and people who are generally in the cult refer to in their own secret doctrine. So you see within this book, for example, the lightning strike on tree, which is a very common symbol for the Satans. They kind of invert the whole Genesis story about the tree of good and evil, and the lightning bolt represents the devil striking the tree and giving it life. So they believe that the devil is the person who's giving them the tree of knowledge to see the world properly, and that's repeated in Ninth Gate. There's also a guy giving the sign of silence, or silence is golden, which is the right hand over your lips, which is something that that Crowley used a lot. It's a sign of Harpocrates, the Greek god of silence, and Ra-Hur-Krat, who is the Egyptian god of silence. So you see that similar theme within the Ninth Gate. You also see the chessboard 8x8, and that's something that Satanists use as a symbol for their own intelligence, the use of their human intelligence to, come out on top. So you see that within this art that's within this movie. There's also this, the Whore of Babylon. She rides the 7-headed beast, and that's depicted within the movie as well. So then you see the 7 theme, and that goes back to Crowley's 2 sevens are his representation, which is the number 77, which also is one of the planes within 9/11. 77 is half of it is the Whore of Babylon, and the other half is the 7 represents the beast. So it's the conjunction of the Whore of Babylon, beast in Babylon, and you can see that on Crowley's sigil of Babylon. It's a 7-headed or 7-sided star with the 77s in there. So you see that's included within this movie, The Ninth Gate, and also the Hanged Man, which is something from the tarot, Crowley's tarot. So it's just suffused. The whole thing is basically this kind of satanic Pilgrim's Progress or something like that. It's really
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Once you realize what they're really saying, because what happens is Johnny Depp's character suffuses, basically takes over from his own boss, and then enters into the temple himself, which was what his boss wanted to do, or the guy who hired him wanted to do. And it's kind of deceiving because here's this Johnny Depp character who, has a little baby face. I think he was 34 at the time the film was shot. So it's kind of, you don't quite get the kind of griminess of the satanic stuff in there when he's playing it, because he looks like, he's 22. But anyway, that's a very interesting movie, and I kind of break down all of the different visuals in there in my film. And another one that just came up with Polanski is a movie that came out recently, which I didn't include in my outline, but it's called The Ghost Rider. And there's a very important scene within The Ghost Rider that I included in my documentary where Ewan McGregor is the lead character. He's basically taking over somebody else who was writing a biography for the Prime Minister of England, or former Prime Minister. He turned up dead, so Ewan McGregor's taking over, and he's on this kind of path of discovery. Well, he goes to this guy's house who's friends, or was friends, with the former Prime Minister, and he's played by Lewis Wilkinson, and the discussion between them is incredible. It's something that everybody should see, because this Lewis Wilkinson's character is basically he symbolizes the Anglo-American establishment. So this character went to Yale, Harvard, and Cambridge. He was a member of the Arcadia Society. Well, Arcadia is, the principality within Greece where the god Pan lives, which Pan is a representation of Satan. So this guy, they're basically putting him up on the kind of occult path. He also turns out to be a member of the CIA, and they're flashing satanic secret signs in this sequence. So I definitely recommend everybody watch. I don't want to ruin the whole story, but I definitely recommend this movie, The Ghost Rider, if you have time, and it's pretty interesting.
All right, and we're also talking, just so people know, that there is not the Ghost Rider, it's the writer.
Thank you. You're right. It is the writer.
Well, somebody from New Jersey is allowed to do that, not you.
Okay, sorry. I apologize. Ghost Writer. So anyway, it's a very interesting movie, but I think what's the import is what the whoever the writer or the director, Polanski put some incredible insights into this whole discussion between these two parties, and there's a bunch of 11s mentioned. Basically, before the main character, Ewan McGregor, goes in to discuss the sequence with this guy from Harvard, Yale, and Cambridge, he's reading the old document, and the chapter that he's reading is chapter 11. So there's your 11 signal there again. So it's not there by accident. So that's basically kind of what I detailed with Polanski. And there's some other movies. There's an End of Days movie by Schwarzenegger. It was right before 9/11. It's fascinating because it includes Prometheus imagery, which I've discussed. There's also some 11s. But one of the most interesting sequences is he's basically going up against the devil. But there's a sequence where he comes back to his apartment, and in the background is the WTC, and the devil's appeared there. That's the first scene that he sees the devil. So when you come to understand, I think, what I argue in my book is basically, the 9/11 event had occult overlays. It's an important foreshadowing for that when you see the devil with the background of this, the WTC structure. So it's amazing. That movie grossed about $250 million worldwide, so it was popular. I never saw it until recently, and so that's it. And then I kind of move on to Angel Heart. There's a reference to 93. Crowley's 93. There's an Eye of Horus in there. Horus is he had one of his eyes stabbed out by his brother Set, and Crowley, how Horus was a representation of Lucifer for him. And then there's references to Edward Kelly. Edward Kelly and John Dee were some of the 16th century magicians under Elizabeth I. So, there's a lot of magical references there. And then They Live, which is a pretty well-known movie now, and kind of a conspiracy.
And you know what? You know what? You hit me. I think you and I were talking about Carpenter.
Uh-huh.
Is it Carpenter who did that flick? He did.
Yes, that's Carpenter, correct.
But aren't you the one that told me that he kind of? I think it was Carpenter was the one you were telling me kind of does this kind of thing.
Well, I don't know if maybe back in the day. I don't know. I mean,
all right.
He definitely put that reference of 93 in They Live. I mean, it's right there up on the wall when the two characters walk into kind of a headquarter there, and it's very apparent. I have it in my film. You can see it. And I'm sure there's stuff I missed, but these are the most glaring references to kind of the Crowley, the deeper occult, outside of Masonry. There's a movie called Vantage Point that came out that includes it's like the 11s, the lone gunman, conspiracy, basically at the end. There's basically a conspiracy to kill the president, and you never really figure out who did it. But I don't want to ruin the whole movie, but there's definitely the 11 reference. Enemy of the State includes the 9/11 references. There's many 11s in there as well, which is a very popular movie. It kind of precurses, the surveillance grid, surveillance state. Mm-hmm. Trading Places, which is by Aaron Russo, has some 11s and references to the WTC in there. And I consider Aaron Russo pretty well connected. He did Freedom to Fascism, and he had a meeting with one of the Rockefeller family, and the conversations between Russo and Rockefeller kind of are the same or correlative to what we were talking about earlier in this conversation from the Clocks episode of Millennium, where there's two opposing parties, one with who says there's going to be cataclysms and, we're going to run the thing and who cares about the little people? And then there's the guy who says, well, why don't you have any empathy? So this kind of standard, interplay or discussion seems to happen in and out of the realm of, films and reality, I guess. Mm-hmm. Might be a little too far. And then I include The Wiz. The Wiz is like The Wizard of Oz. That was kind of like the black or African American version of The Wizard of Oz, and they have their final sequence right there at the center of the WTC. There's a big they use the great bronze caryatid and cover it with an OZ, and in Crowley's system, OZ or Oz equals 77. So you see that occult reference, whether it's there by chance or not. It's up to the viewer to decide, but it's pretty amazing when you see this. The center of the Emerald City is this huge occult complex in New York. And then Godspell, like we talked about earlier, has a reference to Descent of a Plane. So I've included all those things in there, and when you put them all together, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Do you have time for a little bit? Can I shoot some stuff at you? Because if you got more to cover, I want you to do that. Other than that, there are some things I like to bounce off you.
Go for it.
All right. One of the things, too, as you were speaking, it reminded me of something. I've been doing a series based on the book written by Leonard Peikoff called The Ominous Parallels, the End of Freedom in America.
Right.
And something that's said in here is the way things really are. And it is not good news for human beings. But, again, for the flesh, yeah, it's not good. But this isn't the end of the road. But let me just state this, because it makes me think of what we saw, even in They Live. The good guys really did win at the end, if you think about it. You know what I mean?
Right. They revealed
Right.
the whole secret. Right. The game was up.
And in a few of the movies you just rolled off really quickly, it wasn't necessarily that the good guys win. But what Peikoff addresses with regard to how the Weimar Republic morphed, mutated into Nazi Germany, there was a philosopher of some merit, Max Weber. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, but I was floored by the students wanted to hear Max Weber talk. They were like, Max, what should we do? And this is more or less, I would think, a paraphrase, but this is what happened, and I'm quoting Peikoff's text. They must not, Weber told the students, be taken in by religious dogmatists or by irrationalist charlatans, left or right, who pretend to offer solution to the world's problems. The fact is, he explained, there are no solutions. Certainty is unattainable by man. Knowledge is provisional. Values are relative. Scholars are merely specialists doing technical jobs, detached from life. But, when he finally came out and said there are no solutions, and the reason why this hits home to me is because when I'm at this point in my show, to me it was really a journey for the 8 years doing the radio, because I came to a point that I didn't want to come to, and I realized that the whole thing is fated. But then you realize in Scripture, not that we're pessimists or doomsday people, but you realize if you want to get into a fist fight, if you want to fight evil, flesh to flesh, you lose. That's the deal.
Right.
And, and what I'm saying, so when Weber turns around from wherever his head is at, and he says, folks, there's no solutions. It's like, yeah, but people don't want to hear that. And I'm at this point right now, and it's been triggered by what you just said, and that is, folks, what do you want me to tell you? The cavalry comes, the Indians run away, the women the children get saved. It doesn't work like that.
Well, I would say that there are spiritual solutions. I mean,
exactly, but not fleshly.
I mean, I'd say there's spiritual solutions. I would also say that awareness and knowledge and understanding alleviate a lot of the
angst,
stresses, fears, and uncertainties. So when you really get a clearer picture of the world, then you're not as surprised or disappointed or dejected because you have a better understanding. At least that's where I'm coming from. For me, it's been a quest for a long period of time to really get a proper understanding of how the world really works. It's pretty sad to think that I'm at a little bit past 40 and haven't quite figured it all out yet. So,
think about all those people who haven't and won't. I mean, even Christians are slow because they still want to see the bad guys get beat up. And they think warfare is okay if you can do that. It's like, no, you don't get it. So when you say there were spiritual solutions, that's it. You have to stay inside that spiritual boundary. If you want to start, hitting, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
No,
I would agree with that. I mean, I think the spiritual solution is the way to go, and I think that, it alleviates all the problems. So, a lot of the things that, you want to try to better yourself and, reach those kind of spiritual resolutions, I guess. individually. And
but that's the good news.
So few there be who find it, as it's been said.
No, you're absolutely right. Like you said, you're 40 and you feel bad about it. Well, I guess what was I? I hit 50.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, this part of my work is like my own research, and what I've done in the books and the movies is not merely, put it out, but have a repository for other people, so that there might be some, kid who's 16 or 17 that says, I'm trying to figure it out. At least this will give them 2 steps up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully. I mean, I don't know how long the ladder is, but somebody can say, okay, so there is something secret going on that I'm not a part of. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, there's proof. There's proof and evidence. If people can believe it, that's really the next step. Because I talk to people all the day, they can't believe it. They can't believe that 9/11's an inside job. They literally cannot believe it.
What's funny? No, it's not funny. Why we use that term, I don't know. But it's what's strange and weird and everything else. If you think about it, it was a false magician's trick. Because,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, still using video and film and all that other stuff, it was a cheap parlor magician's trick. Bodies don't disappear. Planes don't disappear. I don't care where you crash them into, at what speed. Impossible. Never happened on the planet Earth. And yet that day they sold that stinker. Amazing.
Right.
And because what is it? Wouldn't you also say, though, William, that part of this is that if you break down the physics of it, aside from all the lies that went out with that, NIST report 1 and 2, the thing is like, look, go look for yourself. And when you come to the conclusion that you've been lied to, and this is where we go again, that people look at you, and as Herb Smith and Andy Senior used to say, they hit the second level, which is they've already thought about, oh my God, my government's bad. Yeah, it is. And live with it. It's okay. That's the way it goes. They've all been bad. And we were saying that human government is only a failed experiment over and over again. They try, it doesn't work. We have nothing to show that human beings can ever arise to a point by themselves to govern themselves, what would you call it, in a fair manner, whatever it is. And that's because when you threw Jehovah out, that's the way it goes. You left to your own. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's not that we're looking for, it's not that Christians are looking for destruction and pessimism. It's the point is, it's been clear to me, there's never been anything that human beings did of themselves that ever lasted. And now we're right in that sunset period ourselves. And a lot of people think it's going to come back again. It's not. And so they're going to be confronted with a bunch of very unpleasant truths. But if you know that this isn't the end of the line, that the body may die, but the spirit goes on, don't worry about it. I mean, I still do these shows. You'll still do your work. We try to tell people what's going on. But if you think you're going to fist fight somebody or beat them, and go through this Red Dawn thing, where you're going to shoot the bad guys and you win, no, it ain't going to happen that way.
Yeah. No, you're not going to be very successful. I think that, in a temporal sense, is to recognize that you're going into kind of an evil surveillance debt-based system of control,
right. Mm-hmm.
and to try to avoid getting into that as much as possible. And everybody has to follow what the spirit is advising them, but you definitely don't want to subject your kids to that, because it's just greater and greater control.
Yep.
Down to a minuscule level. You can just see that in the TSA, which is absolutely insane. I mean, that's just a total joke. Like, I saw this video of them, like, trying to, there's a 3-year-old kid. I mean, who's going to, I'm going to go on a travel, I'm going to hook a bomb up to my son and get on a plane or something. I mean, is that just crazy?
Well, what they would say is,
absolutely insane.
Well, they're saying anything is possible. If that's the case, I tell you, why don't we just call the whole damn thing off?
Yeah, I agree.
It's ridiculous.
If anything's possible, and what's your risk? I mean, it just doesn't make. I mean, even the most basic sense of rationality applied to that situation, and the whole rationale just falls to dust. Actually, that's probably like half of the existing institutions in the world. Actually, if you applied just fundamental rationality, they would just their reason for existence would evaporate. Anyway.
Oh, well, I want to hit you with this. By the way, I have 2 solutions to the pat down, but not on this show.
Right.
I don't want to do that to you. But I got one last thing to hit you with. But was there something else on your mind?
Well, I just was going to go through the last bit of the thing is the suppressed films.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Okay.
I mean, the only thing, there's like some films that were suppressed. Manchurian Candidate was one of the most important, 1962. John Frankenheimer, director. There's, like, it's basically about mind control. and there's some 11s in there, so clearly he was linked into something. And one of the interesting, strange synchronicities is Robert Kennedy went to a party at Frankenheimer's house, 1968. Sharon Tate was there. The next day, Robert Kennedy, gets killed by Sirhan Sirhan, a clear mind control patsy. I mean, if you read about the story, I don't go into great detail, but Sirhan Sirhan had serious brain injury when he was a horse jockey. He was this small person. I think he was somewhere between 5'2" and 5'4", and he was on that spectrum of hypnotized individuals where some people really cannot be hypnotized, but he was like one of the easiest and most hypnotizable subjects somebody had ever studied when they went to the jail. So, he doesn't even remember what happened. So that's Manchurian Candidate. And then a very important film that I think that everybody should watch is called Parallax View.
Yes.
That was by a director, Alan Pakula, and it basically is an honest assessment of American political life as I've seen, which basically details a political assassination, and it's an amazing film. There's right on the intro. There's an 11 there, so I don't know how that got into that, but I definitely recommend that film. The new Manchurian Candidate also has the 11s in it. It's also, had Denzel Washington, a lot of stars. It was done in 2004. It's a much clumsier version of the 1962 version. And there's some interesting points. I know that one of your earlier shows that you'd done the last couple of weeks talked about video manipulation. In the very end of the film, they basically video manipulate the Denzel Washington character out of the film. And while they're doing so, there's basically an 11 on the screen right there. So it's like the magic of video manipulation right there. So it kind of reaffirms what you guys were talking about on that earlier show. And then clearly suppressed film is Good Shepherd. Huge A-level stars were in it: Matt Damon, Angelina Jolie, directed by Robert De Niro. Talks about Skull and Bones, the Anglo-American establishment, so I kind of just go into that as well.
The Good Shepherd, I watched it twice, but I'll tell you, it is nerve-wracking for me because that soundtrack, they do all this whispering and stuff, and I'm like, I mean, not that I'm hard of hearing, it's just that everything was kind of like muted. I'm like, what? Come on. I mean, I can follow it for the most part because I understand what's going on. I almost wish, though, it just seemed everything was in hushed secrecy, which in a way it is, but I get really frustrated trying to watch it for what they all were trying to tell. To me, it's a pretty scrambled storyline, but still in all, I mean, it's based on the truth, and you and I know it.
Yeah. And I mean, it is. I would say it's. I think they're just trying to capture that old, and like one of the most salient moments there is where, he's talking to a guy from the mob, and they need the help from the mob, and he basically said, this Joe Pesci character asked Matt Damon, what do you got? We have this. All of our people have this. What do you guys have? And Matt Damon's character responds, "We have our country, and you're all just visiting." So you kind of get that absolutely exclusionary attitude from this, Anglo-American establishment type character. So,
but isn't it interesting that and I'll take the 1962 version of Manchurian Candidate over the new one.
Absolutely, I would too.
And consider when it was shown, 1962.
Yeah.
And I mean, who's the guy that did that? He's the one that writes the...
Richard Condon.
There you go. The spy stuff and everything. But he was right on. He knew exactly what was going on. This was based on experiments both here and in... Well, everybody has a Manchurian Candidate program going no matter where you are. And yet, and people took this as fiction, but he was giving you the straight skinny. And then what happens? Yeah. And then afterwards, we have a string of MK Ultra assassins.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing.
That's why it's important. That's why it was suppressed. I mean, I think that sequence where the intro sequence that takes place in Manchuria with the candidates where they're switching between the old ladies and the flower sequence and then all these hardline communist apparatchiks is one of the most brilliant scenes in all of American filmmaking. I mean, it's so great.
You're right.
I just really admired that film.
And it also told you about what politics is really like. how you get somebody to be successful. I mean, they tell you right there. And of course, in '62, people aren't really paying attention. They go, ho, 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 that's really funny. That's just, it's kind of like a fiction thing, so don't worry about it. No, he told you the truth. And the other thing I'm going through now, by the way, I mean, not only do we have Sirhan Sirhan as a patsy, when you have more rounds that could have been fired by Sirhan Sirhan, and then I get into the assassination attempt on Wallace. Same damn thing. You got Bremer coming down from Wisconsin. You've got, 5 people shot by how many bullets? 11 bullets, 13 wounds, something like that. And he's got a 5-shot 38. Come on, man.
And it's the same thing. Look at Chapman and Lennon. I heard there were more bullets that were shot than available. So Chapman's clearly a mind-controlled patsy. And that actually brings us full circle back to Kenneth Anger, because Kenneth Anger had a connection to to Chapman. So, that was interesting in that article that you sent me. It basically details how Anger had some kind of connection to that guy. So, yeah, these mind-controlled patsies, they exist. The guys who shot Reagan, what was his name?
Hinckley.
Hinckley, thank you. So, yeah, so
do you know who
that's why Manchurian Candidate is very important.
Do you know who Hinckley was related to?
He was related to his father, who was friends with Bush, right?
Yeah, his parents were Bush backers. His older brother was tight with what was it, Neil Bush?
Neil, yeah, I think so.
But
they were having dinner. The family, I think Neil Bush was having dinner with the family the day before the shooting.
Right. And
something like that.
And then people will go, well, how could they give up their sons? And and then we say that's what they are. That's what they're about. They don't care. They're ice monsters. And so, by the way, he's out now and probably hidden somewhere away in the Hinckley family. But he's gone from his detention, if you will.
They might have just known he was the strange one in the family or something, and gave him up. Who knows?
Gives a crap? That's right. Nobody cares. And I'll just throw one other thing out with movies that I think fit in with what you're doing, and this also goes back to why do tigers eat their young? And this goes to Winter Kills. Do you remember that movie?
I've never even heard of that. What's that?
Well, you got to get your hands on it. If you don't, I'll
send it down.
All right, Winter Kills.
Winter Kills.
The characters are John Huston and Jeff Bridges. You can do an easy search anywhere, and you'll pop that thing up. That is, baldly, a reference to Kennedy be given up by his old man Joe.
Interesting.
For certain reasons and promises and things you didn't do. You got to see it. I'll tell you what. That's another one that definitely belongs in that category. And that's what they were telling you. John Huston playing Joe Kennedy, the old nasty guy. Hey, you killed my son. It's business.
Right, and he was a bastard.
Oh man,
the father was a real bastard.
That's another ice monster.
Yeah, the Kennedy. The whole thing is just really bizarre. The whole Kennedy mythos of the first family was fake. That the kids barely ever saw their dad. All those pictures were the 1 or 2 times they would see him a year or something like that. They were just raised in prep schools and at elite universities, but they really didn't have that much of a connection to their father.
But it seems that's what happens. The privileged also pay a price. And if they ever had any blood in their veins, you can understand why it was drained. Except I will say this, that I think probably JFK, look, he was a bastard. He knew the way the deal was. He saw what his father did. They all know the way the world ran. But I actually do believe that he hiccuped and said, I can't do this, much like Lincoln did.
Absolutely.
And it was
no doubt. I mean, the thing about Kennedy that was different than his dad is that the son had been through the war and seen everybody die. He was one that barely made it through. So, for me, that's what deeply affected him. And then he had all these hawks surrounding him, and that was it.
Yeah, and maybe for another day, and I've done some of this stuff a long time ago with Adam Go Rightly, but I also wonder, too, and I mean, this is something where, in a way you don't want to seem like sordid by looking at it, but there's something that's also struck me about what would you call it, the complete occult guide to the killing of the king, meaning presidents and such. And when I look at all the characters that were in and around Dallas, it was a celebration. I mean, this thing was an event. It was almost like a bowl game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
that's what Howard Hunt called it, the big event.
Yeah, and I mean, it's almost like in the true occult sense, according to the primer on these things, you must have 3 assassins. It goes back to the whole story about who killed Osiris. There were 3 assassins, and And it had to be a headshot and all that other stuff. I tell you what, it's like, it really makes me think about that. It makes me think about the real assassination of Caesar. Weren't there 3 involved in that, and et cetera, et cetera? I mean, I'm not getting hung up on this stuff, but it's almost like when you really have a truly decent leader and you want to get rid of him, you got to do it the right way. You know what I mean? Whereas with Nixon, he was an idiot, so they spanked him and sent him home.
Right. There
was no headshot.
He was a lackey from the beginning. He was always that.
I know, he was a mess, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, you kind of feel sorry for him. He's kind of like an Obama figure, kind of this pathetic outsider.
I tell you what.
He was, you know what they used to call him in law school? They called him Old Iron Ass because all he did is just sit in the library and read books all day. And his personality was very interesting.
He was not telegenic, we understand that, but still and all, he is the kind of guy, honestly, if I was in the Sahara Desert and he was trying to sell me a glass of water, I wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'm no crook. Yes, you are, Dick. So
just one more movie. You added one. There's another movie called Executive Action.
Yep.
Yeah, that is an interesting movie too, which I didn't include, but it's worth a watch.
Right.
It has Burt Lancaster, but there's all kinds of themes about the analysis of the killing of Kennedy, and also kind of eugenics, world population control discussions. Like, it's something else.
And
I definitely would recommend that film.
Do you remember off the top of your head that was a 70s movie? I think it was.
Yeah, 1973.
I tell you what, there was a spate of movies.
72.
There was a spate of movies that came out at that time. Parallax View, I believe, also was 70, was it not? 70s?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Let me check that.
Because when I look back, I'm a little surprised at some of the stuff that came out then when I wasn't paying attention.
1974.
Yeah.
Parallax View.
Yeah. Very interesting, the stuff that
Warren
came out.
Beatty.
Yep. So I don't know why they did that, but maybe it was a catharsis and or a warning of what was to come. But there were some some of those movies are really sweet that were made at that time.
Well, if you look at the Parallax Views poster, you have this killing. The whole movie is basically about political killing, and it says on the top, "As American as apple pie." It is just amazing. You have to see some of these movie posters are great. As American as, and the other movie poster for Parallax View says he knew too much. So you see these same things. These are the same things people are going through now. It's all been there. It's just been history that's lost or covered up.
I got
non-emphasized.
Well, I got into an exchange with someone. I said, "Listen, okay, let's just get this straight. For you who hear something that you're not comfortable with or didn't hear or read before, and immediately knee-jerk react like a Pavlovian subject, which you are, oh, that's conspiracy theory. Did you ever think at any time that you have been subject to suppressed history, suppressed news, that we've very much been propagandized ourselves, and those of us who are avarice readers, like these people all say, they take in so much information. If you take in a lot of sludge, all you've got is sludge. And that's what they've done. And they never consider this kind of stuff, and it's right out there, right in their face, and yet it's an amazing situation. You talk
Look
about
at the public school education. It is just garbage. All of the liberal arts and public schools should be, thrown away. It's just absolute mind control. You have to, most people right now are in a battle to overcome that barrier that people have put in their brains. It's crazy.
Well, obviously that was the main objective, and that was accomplished in this country when they gave the education system over to the boys from the University of Chicago, to include Dewey and Bloom and others. Very interesting. So,
anything that goes back to the University of Chicago or Yale.
You got it. That's
red flag. Beep, beep.
Yeah, that was definitely an incubator for some really, shall we say, interesting ideas.
Yeah.
All right, William Ramsey, we thank you for being with us, doing a little overtime, and I appreciate it. What I was going to throw at you later on was, if we're a Christian country, then somebody explain D.C. to me, but that'll be for another time. For obvious reasons. I know.
Oh, man.
I know. There you go. I tell you, it's
explain to me the Washington Monument.
It gets better. Man. Oh, without a doubt. Oh. And Georgie was sitting up on the hill in Mount Vernon, didn't notice what was going on. So, okay.
Yeah.
All righty.
Right.
Yeah, what's Columbia, by the way? Okay. I know. And why is the lady... Oh, here's what I did want to close out with you. You said as American as apple pie. Did you say that?
That's what it said. That's what it said on the poster for Parallax View.
Take in consideration the assassinations or attempts that are really admitted to, and then factor in the other ones that are suppressed, like William Henry Harris. Yeah, cold in 30 days. Nah, not really. And just take a look at the spate between 1865, and like 1901. You know, how many years were you looking at there? 36? 36. And we had 4 presidents offed. Do I have that right? Maybe 3. But who's counting?
And I heard Wilson was poisoned. I mean, they basically put through the Federal Reserve, and then he suddenly got sick.
Well,
I don't know.
That boy's got...
History has to be rewritten.
Well, we got... Lincoln gets whacked in 65. Garfield gets whacked in 81. And McKinley gets whacked in 01. Yeah, so there's only 3. I'm surprised. But anyway, I mean, and can you take a look at a country that's supposed to be civilized and say how in the world, you know, within that time span did you have 3 heads of state successfully knocked off by, of course, lone gunmen? Come on, folks. It doesn't work like that. You know what I mean?
You have to. That's why Parallax View is so important, because they have the same kind of commission structure, and they all, I mean, the conclusion, I have it in my film, you know, we've come to the conclusion that so-and-so and so acted alone. Due to, you know, and obviously they found out, you know, he's crazy and he had some irrational traits, just like every other one.
Well, then that would only mean to me that insane maniacs in the United States just have a great success rate at killing heads of state. That's amazing. Okay, I got you. But Phelps and I years ago did a series called Pop Go the Presidents. And we took a look at, you know, those that aren't supposed to be, like Zachary Taylor's poisoning. Well, the arsenic in his system was it was usual. Okay. All right.
Your records, I mean, the likelihood of, why would you want to be president? Your likelihood of getting shot are so high.
Only if you change your mind. That's the deal. If you play ball, nothing's going to happen to you.
See Parallax View. One of the scenes that I took out of there, he says, they call me independent. Some people say I'm independent for my own good, and then he gets shot immediately. I mean, I'm not joking. That's the line. Yeah, but some people say I'm independent for my own good. That's how the movie starts.
This is why we miss Monty Python.
What's that?
This is why we miss Monty Python.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, can you imagine what they would do with that? I mean, it's true. Oh, Lord.
Great.
All right, listen, thanks for being with us during this holiday as well. Really appreciated it. And I know you're going to be seeing Randy sometime in the near future. So thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can get together again.
For sure. Definitely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, you take care. Have a good one.